So today we're going to look at the swing plane or arc of the golf swing as it travels around our body. I believe, and you can tell me in the comments, that there's quite a lot of confusion around this, particularly with, let's say, the less experienced golfers. So what we're going to start off with is what I call tracing the plane, showing you where the plane is. Now essentially the plane is the angle the club moves at around our body when we're swinging. Now because we're stood aside the ball, this angle will never be vertical. It's always going to be on an angle. It's an angled plane. What I have here is the golf ball and these two rods on my ball to target line, going pretty much at that flag in the distance. Take another rod. You can use golf clubs for this, by the way, if you haven't got rods. Hold it down the shaft like so. What we're looking for to be on a correct arc or plane is I take the golf club back. This wants to point towards that rod on the ground. So the shaft, the hosel, that's where it points. The rod will stay against my belly as I swing back. Then as I get to here, I want to be parallel to that position. And then the butt of the club, this rod now wants to point to that position. That would be deemed as on plane as I swing round the club. And it will be an extension that it'll still be pointing to. Now if this club was in a more, let's say, vertical position, it could still be on plane, but it'd be in a more upright plane. And if it was in a flatter position, it would be more here and still on plane. But what it needs to do is always point to that line. So this tracing skill will give you an idea of where you are in space of time. If it's pointing in towards my toes, that is too upright. It's too much this side, so above the line as we look, that'll be on too flatter plane or above plane position. So what we're looking for in the backswing is it to be on those lines. In the downswing, we shift laterally forward, which gives us this right tilt. The plane now will still go down those lines, but it'll shift to a slightly flatter orientation because I've moved laterally. As I move laterally, that right bend drops the arms a little bit. It's still going to be on the same plane, but flatter. So the backswing and downswing, we will see an ever so slight loop if we're moving correctly. If we're shifting laterally correctly and we're side bending correctly, that becomes a very natural skill. If I asked you to throw a ball, you would throw it and your arm would change in a little hand plane movement like this as you shift forward to create power, to create energy in the throwing arm. That would be pretty natural. That's what happens in golf. We do not want to swing the golf club up and down on exactly the same line. We want it to shift ever so slightly. The only time you can get away with it not shifting is if you have a very, what we would call, deep or flat backswing. So again, if the backswing was kind of in here but still on plane, well, I can't really shift any lower. But again, we're not going to shift as lateral then. We're not going to right bend. So the backswing will become short to stop it then because we haven't got that right bend going over. Because it's so short, we can just go down. So there's a positive in that. There's less movement, there's less shift. The downside in that is, how do we get that low point later? The lateral shift helps get the low point later. It helps get our hands forward in the head of the ball. It also, with the swing being so short, we're not going to create as much power. And again, the deeper we go, the less width we have, we lose power for that too. So what we gain in consistency of arm movement, we kind of lose in power, speed, and shifting that low point forward becomes harder. Obviously, we can compensate, we can move the ball further back and so on. But we don't necessarily want to compensate straight away. We want to compensate only if we can't do what we need to do. So what I'd advise is you'd get these rods and practice moving through those plane stations. You notice this rod doesn't hit me at all. Again, if I get very flicky at the bottom, this rod will hit me. So we can work on the correct amount of shaft lean and release as well. I'm still releasing the club. I might well be releasing it later than you might feel you're going to do. And what I'd encourage you to do is almost hit some really soft shots, going through the positions, trying to feel, again, it doesn't hit you. Now it's going to feel quite alien. Your arms are going to feel probably quite wide compared to normal, but it'll definitely give you a sense of where your arms should be going in space and time and how that reacts within the body. Moving on the correct plane ensures you get the correct path, which ensures then you can hit straight shots as long as the club face is square. If we do that also, we tend to find there's more rotation in the body. Quite often the body will stop working to try and make up for a poor plane. So this will help the natural rotation and hand action through the golf ball that we're all looking to achieve. This tracing drill is one I use quite often. And whenever people struggle with the concept of what swing plane is and where the club should go, this is one I would always go back to. And it can become something you do as a daily at home in the garden or in the yard, just to get a feeling of where the club is traveling in space and time. And if you feel that you're not quite in the right place, this little tracing drill, and even videoing it and checking it out yourself. You can also, if you don't want to hold a club, grab a very cheap laser and attach it to your club so it points down where the club's going. That's a great way of doing it, especially if you're doing in-house on some tiles and you can practice swinging using the lasers regular and often, just to maintain, top up your feels to get that correct plane.